Good evening, and thank you for joining us. The young organizers of Friday's Black Lives Matter protests in Thunder Bay are putting a heavy emphasis on the words safe and peaceful. The planned event at Waverly Park comes in response to the death of George Floyd and the growing unrest around racial injustice, and Thunder Bay police are lending their support. Corey Nordstrom has more.
These 5 youth between the ages of 18 and 21 are responsible for this Friday's Black Lives Matter protest at Waverly Park.
The death of George Floyd has acted as a catalyst and basically enrose the fury of generations that have just been haunting our people.
You know, we've been on pause for so long, and people of color have been waiting around for hundreds and hundreds of years. I feel like now's the best time.
The event page for the protest has had thousands of responses, with over 600 pledging to be there. Colleen Peters is the president of the city's Caribbean and African Multicultural Association. She had no part in the organization of the Black Lives Matter protest, but she'll be there for it. And she's happy to see the next generation of leaders advocating against racism.
They're going to be the change they want to see. They're going to do the work. And I know my future is secured with the hard work of the youth coming up in that activism. So I'm proud, I'm excited, and I'm hopeful.
Because Thunder Bay is a small city, if people don't find it important and needed, it's more than important, it's overdue. We as youth need to take a stand because we are growing up, we see it every day.
Police Chief Sylvie Hoth will participate in the protest. In a statement, she says racism is real and we all have a responsibility to face it and to take real actions to address it. There is no place for silence on this matter. Our purpose in attending the protest on Friday will be to ensure public safety. The group will also require protesters to wear masks, with hundreds available to give out, and will continuously remind protesters to keep a safe distance, with even more being done to ensure it remains peaceful.
We have security in line to be monitoring areas of the park to make sure that everyone is following the requirements of safety, of course, but also not trying to cause a ruckus to the good protest that we're trying to have.
This Friday's Black Lives Matter protest will see individuals begin to arrive at Waverly Park at 3 o'clock. A moment of silence will then take place, honoring all of those who have died due to racism. Then protesters will march around Waverly Park for 8 minutes and 39 seconds, the amount of time that Derek Chauvin pressed his knee into the neck of George Floyd. Protesters will then return to the Waverly Pavilion for speeches and the rest of the event. Corey Nordstrom, TBT News.
The critical care physician at the center of a potential COVID-19 outbreak at Thunder Bay Regional has now tested negative for the virus after taking a second test. However, because the original test was positive, hospital officials say they will continue to treat the case as if the doctor in question has the coronavirus. Up to 140 staff and patients were tested as a result of possible contact with the doctor during his shifts last week. Another 350 have been tested as part of a plan to test all frontline workers at the hospital. Of those tests, 20 have come back and they were all negative. As hospital staff and administration get to know more about COVID-19, Kennedy said it's become about learning how to live with the virus.
Because COVID-19 is going to be with us for a good number of years. And we're going to have these significant hiccups from time to time. And each time that occurs, we're going to get more comfortable living with the risk of COVID-19. And next time, we may not have to shut everything down. We may just have to take a good risk assessment and decide what our next steps are going to be.
Kennedy says despite the negative test, the ICU physician will remain off the job until he gets the all clear. Premier Doug Ford says decisions regarding the reopening of restaurant patios will be made over the next week, and the province will most likely take a regional approach when making those decisions, something that people here in the Northwest have been calling for weeks. Colin DeMello has details.
As a small group of demonstrators outside Queen's Park called on the government to reopen the province immediately, inside Queen's Park, the Premier said the province is inching closer towards that reopening.
Hopefully over the next week we'll be able to discuss that with the people of Ontario.
The government has provided few details about the timeline, but here's what we know about Stage 2. Childcare spaces would be allowed to reopen with limits on capacity. Hair salons and other personal grooming services will resume as well. And stage 2 could also include outdoor restaurant patios as well. The Premier says some parts of Ontario are doing better than others, which means the government is still looking at a regional approach.
And I know a lot of people in the rural areas want that. That's on the health table right now, and they'll make those decisions within the week.
What could also come next week, changes to social gatherings.
We want to be able to expand that as we expand our economy, to expand our society as well. So we are looking at what the appropriate number is.
While the government is dropping hints about what is to come, the lack of detail is leading to some frustration.
I really do believe that Ontarians are being left in the dark. I do believe that these decisions are being made in a back room, but nobody knows who exactly it is that has the Premier's ear at any moment.
Critics are calling on the government to make the decision-making process more transparent, allowing the millions of people affected to have a better view of the government's pandemic response.
Thunder Bay City Council is asking to be kept in the loop when it comes to making decisions on hosting evacuees. That decision and a number of others are being handled by Thunder Bay's Municipal Emergency Control Group during the pandemic. The MECG is made up of city officials, including the mayor and city manager, as well as emergency services, health experts, and others. It's responsible for taking action to keep citizens safe during an emergency. The controversial decision to not accept evacuees facing floods or wildfires in northern communities this year was made in late March, about 2 weeks after the global pandemic was declared. On Monday, Council unanimously approved a motion from Councillor Mark Benz asking for a report from administration identifying ways Council can be more engaged in decisions pertaining to hosting evacuees.
This resolution in no way makes any judgment of what our Municipal Emergency Control Group had decided. It simply is just requesting information from our administration as to when and where it might make sense for council to be engaged in decisions regarding hosting evacuees. Because these decisions are far more than just operational, although the operational component is extremely important. They are political decisions as well.
Benz went on to say he recognizes it isn't always feasible to include council, as the MECG has to make split decisions in the interest of public safety. City staff will report back by June 22nd. A group of economic agencies have compiled results of their first round of surveys on how COVID-19 is impacting businesses in the Thunder Bay area. But 45% of them were forced to shut down during the pandemic. The survey results are meant to ensure the federal and provincial governments understand the local needs during the reopening process. Avery McRae reports.
Nearly half of the Thunder Bay area businesses that responded to the survey about the COVID-19 impact had to temporarily close their doors by the end of April due to pandemic restrictions. It's one of the key findings from the online questionnaire launched by the Thunder Bay CEDC, the Chamber of Commerce, the area's Workforce Planning Board, and the Northern Policy Institute. 77 businesses took part in the first round of surveys, with 91% experiencing a decrease in sales. 45% of storefronts had to temporarily shut down, while 28% had to reduce their staff. Economic Development Supervisor Piero Pucci knows the numbers may be frightful, but says things have improved since the results were collected.
There's some bright spots that we're seeing outside of the survey. So for an example, we're still seeing some businesses open. Today we have, for example, Royal Aleppo just down the street here has replaced Damascus and Air, which closed down. So, very exciting during a time when we're, unfortunately seeing some sad news around business closures. But so far, we're confident that the economy will bounce back.
When it comes to the federal government's COVID-19 programs for employers, area businesses have mixed responses. 40% are very satisfied or somewhat satisfied with the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy Program, while 55% are very or somewhat satisfied with the Canada Emergency Response Benefits. Pucci says the survey results help demonstrate the need for government supports tailored to the area and expects more satisfaction on support programs in the next survey.
Because there's been a number of new programs that have been introduced since the first survey, particularly the regional funding that was offered by FedNor and from Thunder Bay Ventures. So we're going to see if that's going to have an impact to fill some of that gap. But we are hearing the same things from the business community, that either they didn't qualify or they couldn't, it wasn't enough funding for them.
The 5-minute online survey will continue through September for businesses in the city and district communities. The survey itself won't change much from month to month, but Pucci says that will give the group a better idea on how businesses are progressing. Avery McCrae, TBT News.
Today marks the one-year anniversary of the final report of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. The 1,200-page report outlines the conclusion that decades of systematic racism and human rights violations contributed to the death and disappearances of hundreds of Indigenous women and girls across Canada. With the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, the vulnerable in society have become even more at risk. The United Nations has documented that in Ontario, violence towards Indigenous women has increased during the pandemic. Ontario Native Women's Association Executive Director Cora Maguire-Surrett says her team has continued their work during the pandemic and have received an increase in calls. She says since the pandemic began, the association has helped over 8,000 women across Ontario. The federal government originally planned to announce their national action plan today in response to the original report, but delayed the announcement due to COVID-19. Maguire-Surrett says the next steps must start with the women already affected.
From here, Indigenous women need to lead the action plan. You know, we can't have it from a top-down approach. It really does need to come from the grassroots up. It needs to come from the community. It needs to come from Indigenous women in all communities across Canada. Indigenous women have to lead in order for this to be successful. They've led us this far. We can't let them down by not continuing to hear their voices, and for us to work collectively together and do something about it. The time for action is now.
Onwa says it will not allow the current pandemic to negate the work done in improving the lives of Indigenous women across Ontario. A Thunder Bay man is dead after a boat capsized on Drift Lake just west of the city. OPP responded to the scene just after noon yesterday. The victim has been identified as 62-year-old Antonio Arruda. OPP say he was not wearing a life jacket at the time of the incident and was pronounced dead after being transported to the regional hospital. Thunder Bay Fire Rescue crews responded to a blaze outside a seniors complex on Lily Street Tuesday evening. Thankfully, the damage was minimal, but more precautions are going to be taken moving forward. Around 5 o'clock, smoke and fire was noticed coming from the link, which connects the Lila Greco Supportive Housing Building with Hogarth Riverview Manor. Firefighters responded quickly and there were no injuries to staff or residents. As of now, it appears that the fire was started by a discarded cigarette. Byron Ball, the Vice President of Planning of Infrastructure at St. Joe's, says because of this fire, they're going to be a bit more strict on the practices that they already have in place.
Absolutely. St. Joseph's Care Group, we have numerous practices and policies that we work with our tenants and our clients to try and enforce around smoking and better practices to ensure the safety of staff and clients. And we're just going to reinforce those practices and put them into place.
Ball says they will also start looking at replacing wood chips with rock to avoid an incident like this in the future. Thunder Bay OPP are reporting a major drug bust after a traffic stop last Thursday. 25-year-old Chunya man is facing numerous charges after police found 50 pounds of marijuana, $95,000 in cash, and $160,000 worth of jewelry inside the BMW SUV. The suspect has been released and will be back in court in August. Meanwhile, OPP are also reporting a collision between one of their vehicles and a moose. It happened last Friday, just before midnight. An officer from the Thunder Bay detachment was patrolling in the Chappaqua area of Highway 17 when their cruiser struck a moose that entered the roadway. The vehicle was severely damaged and the officer suffered minor injuries that were treated at Thunder Bay Regional Hospital, and he was released a short time later. The OPP are reminding motorists that moose are more active on Northwest Region roadways at this time of year. Thunder Bay resident Patricia Lee turned 90 years young today. While her family typically has a big get-together for the occasion, this year was a bit different due to COVID-19. However, that didn't stop close to 20 family members from gathering outside Lakewood Manor on Vickers Street to sing happy birthday to their mom and grandmother. Lee first came out on the porch where she was serenaded by friends and family, and afterwards came downstairs where everyone took turns saying hello. Lee's daughter Jill says she's very happy the family was able to come out and take part in this momentous occasion.
My sisters and my brothers and my children, so her grandchildren, and yeah, and some sister-in-laws and brother-in-laws are all out to make her day great, to be together and as a family and to honor her for raising us for as long as she did.
Jill says she's hopeful that the next year we'll be able to spend Patricia's 91st birthday all together once again.
I definitely chose the right day to do it. It was
kidding.
beautiful outside. Am I right, Fiona?
Oh,